"You're just confused, Vivian. You don't know what's real anymore." That was it. The first shard of ice that pierced through the fog of my life delivered in the velvet voice of the man I had shared a bed with for 30 years. My husband, Sterling. If you're listening to this, maybe you know someone like Sterling. Or maybe, God forbid, you've lived it. But back then, I didn't have the words for it. I didn't understand what was happening to me. I just knew my world felt like it was shrinking day by day until there was nothing left but the air he allowed me to breathe. We lived in a beautiful house, the kind you see in magazines, sprawling lawns, tasteful decor, the picture of American success. From the outside, we were the golden couple. Sterling, the accomplished professional, charming, articulate, the pillar of the community. And me, his elegant wife, hosting dinner parties, tending to the garden, the perfect homemaker. Our life was a carefully constructed stage, and I was the lead actress, diligently playing my part. But backstage, the reality was different. It wasn't grand pronouncements or dramatic fights. It was subtle, a constant low hum of control that had been tightening around me for decades. It started small, almost imperceptibly, a gentle suggestion that my friends weren't suitable. A quiet disapproval of my hobbies, my clothes, even the way I styled my hair. "Are you sure you want to spend money on that, dear? We have bills, Or after I'd spoken at a party, "That was interesting, Vivian. Perhaps stick to topics you're more familiar with next time." It was always cloaked in concern and love in his superior knowledge of the world. And because I loved him, because I trusted him, I started to believe he was right. I wasn't quite capable. My judgment wasn't sound. I needed his guidance. He handled everything. The finances, of course. "It's easier this way, darling. You shouldn't have to worry your pretty head about numbers." He managed our investments, paid the bills, gave me an allowance. A generous one, mind you, but always with a gentle reminder of where it came from, of my dependence. He scheduled my appointments, decided where we went on vacation, even dictated what furniture we bought. My world, once vibrant and filled with my own choices, became a reflection of his preferences, his comfort, his control. And slowly I faded. My confidence eroded. My voice grew quieter, my opinions tentative. I learned to anticipate his moods, to walk on eggshells, to make myself smaller, less noticeable. I became a ghost in my own house, existing solely in relation to him. My friends drifted away, casualties of his subtle disapproval or my own inability to connect outside of his presence. My sister Martha called less and less. It wasn't his overt prohibition, but the quiet way he'd make it difficult, make me feel guilty for wanting time away from him, or the way he'd comment negatively on them later. It was easier just to stay home, easier just to be his Vivian. I didn't recognize myself in the mirror anymore. The woman I saw there was hesitant, anxious, her eyes holding a perpetual low-level fear. But this was my normal. This was my life. I didn't think of it as abuse. Abuse was bruises, yelling things I saw on TV. This was just marriage, wasn't it? A difficult one maybe, but wasn't that normal too? Everyone had their struggles. Then Caleb came home. He was 20, back from his first year of college. Bright, observant, full of that clear-eyed perspective only someone who hasn't been marinating in dysfunction can have. He walked back into our elegant cage and saw it immediately. He saw the way I flinched when Sterling's key turned in the lock. He saw the automatic deference in my posture. He saw the little sparks of irritation in Sterling's eyes when I expressed an independent thought, quickly smoothed over with a condescending smile. He saw the allowance envelopes, the way Sterling controlled the thermostat and the TV remote with an iron fist disguised as preference. He tried to talk to me, gently at first. "Mom, are you okay? You seem anxious." Or, "Dad was a bit harsh about your painting earlier, wasn't he?" I'd deflect, of course. It was second nature. "Oh, your father didn't mean anything by it. He's just tired." Or anxious. "No, darling, I'm fine. Just a bit preoccupied." The walls were too high, the habits too deeply ingrained. I was protecting him, protecting us, protecting my fragile sense of normalcy. Or maybe I was just too afraid to admit, even to myself, that something was terribly wrong. But Caleb was persistent. And he was smart. He started noticing patterns, collecting data points in his mind. He saw the way Sterling would tell me something one day, then deny it the next, leaving me questioning my memory, my sanity. "Vivian, I never said we were going to paint the living room blue. What are you talking about? Are you feeling all right?" And I'd search my memory, filled with doubt, convinced I must have misheard, misunderstood. One evening, he witnessed something specific. Sterling had promised I could go visit Martha the following weekend. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks, making tentative plans on the phone when Sterling wasn't around. Then just days before Sterling casually announced he'd booked us a weekend getaway, a surprise he called it, that just happened to conflict directly with my plans with Martha. When I gently protested, reminding him, he sighed, rubbed his temples. "Vivian, you're so scattered lately. I never agreed to that. Besides, this trip is so much better for us. Honestly, sometimes I worry about your memory." Caleb was in the next room listening. He saw my face fall, the immediate cloud of confusion and self-doubt that crossed it. He saw Sterling's triumphant, almost gleeful look when he thought I wasn't watching. That night, I heard Caleb in his room long after the house was quiet. I didn't know it then, but he was online, searching, typing in phrases like controlling husband, gaslighting, and financial abuse in marriage. He was finding words for the nameless dread that had been my constant companion. He was discovering that the subtle pressures, the confusing conversations, the isolation, it wasn't just us, it was a recognized pattern, a deliberate strategy. I remember the look on his face the next morning. It wasn't just concern anymore, it was fear. A cold dawning terror that mirrored the feeling deep in my own gut, the one I had suppressed for so long. He looked at me, really, looked at me, and I could see the realization forming in his eyes. His mother wasn't just in a difficult marriage, she was trapped. And the man who had trapped her was his father. The air in the house changed after that. It wasn't quiet anymore. It was tense, charged with unspoken awareness. Sterling, with his uncanny ability to sense any shift in the power dynamic, felt Caleb's presence like a challenge. He saw the way Caleb looked at me, the way he hovered, the quiet conversations they had when he wasn't around, and he escalated. The focus shifted to money. Sterling had always controlled the finances, but now it became overt threatening. He started talking about restructuring, about protecting our assets in this uncertain economy. It sounded sensible on the surface, but the implications were terrifying. He'd bring out complicated spreadsheets, legal documents I didn't understand, pointing to figures using jargon. "See, Vivian, it makes sense to put everything in a single trust for tax purposes, and perhaps it would be wise to list me as the sole trustee given how you sometimes get overwhelmed with these things." He spoke with a practiced calm, but his eyes were sharp, watching my reaction. He proposed selling the house, our home, the only place I felt even a semblance of safety. "It's too much for us now, dear. We should downsize, get something smaller, easier to manage. And of course, simplify the ownership structure." Simplify for him, he meant, leaving me with nothing, nowhere to go. He talked about these things incessantly at breakfast, during dinner, before bed. It was psychological waterboarding. These conversations broke me down. I'd sit there, my mind reeling, trying to follow his logic, feeling increasingly inadequate, incapable. Tears would well up, my hands would tremble. I'd stammer out objections, questions, but he'd just cut me off, sighing dramatically. "Vivian, honestly, you're being emotional. This is practical. Unless you have something to hide. Are you planning for a future without me? Vivian?" He'd twist it, always twist it back to me, making me the problem, the paranoid, ungrateful wife. He'd dredge up past mistakes, tiny things from years ago, magnifying them into proof of my incompetence. "Remember that time you balanced the checkbook and were off by $50? This is why I handle these things." The shame would wash over me, silencing any further protest. Caleb witnessed these exchanges, his face a mask of controlled fury. He'd try to step in. "Dad, maybe Mom needs some time to think about this." Or, "Can we explain this more simply?" Sterling would just wave him away. "Caleb, this is adult business. Your mother is just having a moment. She trusts me to do what's best for her." He made Caleb feel like a child, an interloper. But Caleb didn't back down. He started moving with a quiet purpose. While Sterling was at work, he'd carefully look through the piles of documents left on the study desk, taking photos with his phone. He started keeping a detailed log on a hidden cloud document, dates, times, what was said, what documents were presented. He'd leave voice notes on his phone immediately after a particularly distressing conversation, recounting everything he'd seen and heard, his voice tight with urgency. He was building a case piece by painstaking piece because he knew we both knew that Sterling was systematically trying to dismantle my life. Then came the day Sterling presented me with the papers. Not a full deed or anything final, but legal documents outlining a proposed trust terms that effectively signed away my rights to our joint assets, putting everything under his exclusive control. He called it a draft, something for me to look over, but the pressure in his voice, the expectation in his eyes was clear. Sign, agree, vanish. Looking at those pages filled with legal jargon I couldn't decipher felt like staring into an abyss. The house, my security, my future, it was all being meticulously erased. I felt cornered like a mouse in a trap. The fear wasn't a hum anymore. It was a scream in my chest. I looked at Sterling, and for the first time, I saw not just my husband, but the cold, calculating intent behind the charm. He wasn't just controlling, he was malicious. He intended to leave me with nothing, absolutely nothing. This rising tension, this palpable threat that was no longer psychological but tangible, imminent, was the suffocating air we breathed. And I didn't know how I would ever escape. The day everything exploded was shrouded in a terrifying kind of calm. Sterling had been particularly agitated for days, pacing, muttering about my instability, my increasing confusion. Looking back, I know he was setting the stage. He needed a reason, a justification for what he was about to do. He needed to make me look like the problem. He provoked me subtly at first, bringing up sensitive topics, criticizing me, relentlessly pushing every button he knew existed. I was already at my breaking point from the financial pressure, exhausted and terrified. I broke down. I cried. I pleaded with him to stop, to just listen to me. I must have raised my voice. I remember feeling hysterical, out of control, because I was out of control of my life, my emotions, everything. And then strangers arrived. 2 people in medical uniforms accompanied by a stern-faced woman I later realized was a social worker stood in my living room. Sterling was there looking grave, concerned. He spoke softly to them, gesturing towards me. "You see," his expression said, "my poor wife. She's simply not herself. They told me I needed help, that I was exhibiting signs of distress, of instability. I was confused, terrified. What? No, I'm fine. What's happening?" I protested, my voice trembling. They were polite, but firm. They had papers. Sterling had called. He had painted a picture of a wife who was losing her grip, unpredictable, a danger to herself. He had fabricated incidents, exaggerated my distress, twisted everything that had happened into proof of my mental decline. Despite my pleas, my tearful insistence that I was being set up, they didn't seem to hear me. They only saw the distressed woman Sterling had described standing next to the calm, worried husband. It was like being erased in real time. My reality didn't matter. Only his narrative did. They took me to a psychiatric facility. The commitment itself was a blur of terror and confusion, being taken away from my home, my son. The sterile smell of the institution, the harsh lights, the polite but distant staff. My clothes were taken, replaced with anonymous scrubs. My name became a label on a file. I was stripped of everything that made me me. I was trapped in a world where my word held no weight, where my protests were seen as symptoms of my illness. Sterling visited. He sat beside my bed, holding my hand, looking so sad, so caring. "You just need some rest, darling," he'd say. "This is for your own good. You'll be better here. We'll figure things out when you're well again." His voice was gentle, but his eyes held a cold, triumphant glint I had never seen before. In that moment, the last vestige of doubt evaporated. This wasn't concern. This wasn't help. This was the culmination of his plan. He had put me away to get rid of me, to take everything. Days blurred into a monotonous nightmare. I ate bland food, walked the same hallways, listened to the muted sounds of distress from other patients. I felt utterly powerless, invisible, disbelieved. Every attempt to explain to tell the truth about Sterling was met with sympathetic nods and reassurances that I would feel better once my paranoia subsided. They had only heard Sterling's side, the polished, convincing lies of a man everyone trusted. But in that isolation, stripped of everything, something shifted. The confusion began to clear, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. There was nowhere left to run, nowhere left to hide from the truth. Sterling hadn't just chipped away at me, he had tried to bury me alive. And in that moment, lying in that sterile room, looking at the ceiling, I realized something profound. The person he wanted to disappear wasn't weak, she was just wounded. And the wounds were caused by him. Desperation has a way of forging steel in the soul. The fear didn't vanish, but it was joined by something new, something stronger, pure, unadulterated rage. Rage at Sterling, yes, but also rage at myself for allowing it to happen for so long, and rage at the system that had so easily believed a charming abuser over the woman he was destroying. I couldn't fight back in here. I couldn't scream the truth loud enough for anyone to hear. But I could think, I could remember, and I started cataloging. Every little instance, every condescending remark, every lie, every manipulative act, every time he'd isolated me, controlled me, undermined me. The financial documents he'd shown me, the dates he'd promised things and then denied them, the names of friends he'd alienated, the look in his eyes, that day at home, the specific lies he must have told the doctors and the social worker. It wasn't passive endurance anymore. It was focused resolve. My mind became a steel trap, holding on to every detail, every injustice, every single reason why he deserved to be held accountable. I wasn't a victim anymore. Not completely. The Avenger was being born quietly in the heart of the nightmare. After what felt like an eternity, I was discharged. Perhaps I seemed calmer, more compliant. Perhaps Caleb's desperate initial attempts to talk to the facility staff about his concerns had planted a tiny seed of doubt, though they likely dismissed him too. Or perhaps, having served his purpose, Sterling arranged for my release, confident he had neutralized me, that I was too broken, too confused to ever fight back. I returned to the house, the gilded cage. Physically, I was the same woman who had been taken away, but inside I was fundamentally different. Quieter, yes, but not with fear, with vigilance. My eyes saw everything now. The carefully curated perfection of the house felt like a costume. Sterling acted the part of the relieved husband, welcoming me home, fussing over me. I played along. I had learned the ultimate lesson in that place: hide your true intentions from your captor. That first night, Caleb came to my room. He looked drawn, worried. He hugged me tightly, whispering apologies for not being able to stop it. I held him back, feeling his warmth, his unwavering loyalty. And then I spoke. My voice was low, steady, utterly devoid of the hesitation that had plagued it for years. "Caleb," I said, "your father, he lied to them. About everything. He put me in there to get rid of me." Caleb's eyes widened. He nodded slowly. "I know, Mom. I started looking into things. Before that happened, I found stuff. Notes he made. Numbers that didn't add up. I didn't know what to do." And that was the moment. The quiet conversation where the victim articulated her truth and the catalyst found his purpose. "We need to get out," I said, my voice gaining strength, but not like he wanted. "We need to build a case. Every lie, every document, everything you found, everything I remember, we're going to expose him." Caleb looked at me, and the fear was still there, but now it was mixed with something else, a fierce, protective determination that mirrored my own. "Okay, Mom," he said, "tell me what to do." From that moment on, we operated in secret. Sterling went back to his routines, likely believing I was subdued, grateful to be home, no longer a threat. He didn't see the glances Caleb and I exchanged, the whispered conversations in the kitchen late at night, the coded messages hidden in plain sight. I became the memory bank, the strategist. The time in the facility, the sheer injustice of it, had burned every detail of the preceding years into my mind with searing clarity. I remembered dates, names, specific conversations, types of documents. I remembered which old friends Sterling had systematically isolated me from, who might have witnessed his controlling behavior or heard him make promises he later denied. I remembered specific financial statements he'd shown me, the names of banks, the properties he'd talked about. Caleb was the executor, the quiet operative. Based on my directions, he began the painstaking, terrifying process of gathering evidence. When Sterling was away, he'd carefully search the study, the filing cabinets, the desk drawers. He found copies of those terrifying legal documents Sterling had shown me. He found financial statements that showed discrepancies, transfers I didn't know about. He even found handwritten notes Sterling had made, chilling outlines of his plans, thinly veiled intentions to consolidate assets and secure his future by liquidating mine. The fabricated documents used for the commitment were harder to find hidden away, but we knew they existed because Sterling had shown them to the authorities. It took weeks of careful searching, but Caleb finally located them. The doctor's note Sterling had somehow obtained exaggerating minor issues, and his own sworn statement full of carefully crafted lies. This wasn't just manipulation anymore. This was criminal. The tension was unbearable. Every time Sterling came home unexpectedly, every creak of a floorboard, every open door sent jolts of panic through us. We had to act normally, pretend everything was fine, while secretly dismantling the foundation of his lies right under his nose. We communicated in hushed tones using disposable burner phones for sensitive discussions outside the house or leaving cryptic notes in prearranged spots. Caleb also began reaching out cautiously. He contacted Martha, my sister, explaining things carefully, tentatively. Martha had always been wary of Sterling sensing something was off, but had been unable to break through the wall Sterling had built around me. Hearing the full, terrifying truth from Caleb, seeing the concrete evidence convinced her. She became a cautious ally, willing to listen, maybe even testify if needed. Once we had gathered a critical mass of evidence, especially the fabricated documents related to the commitment, which were undeniable proof of his malice and illegal actions, we knew we couldn't do this alone. We needed professional help. We needed a lawyer. Finding the right lawyer felt like another hurdle. We met with a couple who seemed skeptical, overwhelmed by the complexity of it all, the psychological abuse intertwined with financial and legal machinations. They saw a messy domestic dispute, not a calculated campaign of control. But then we found her, a woman sharp and empathetic who listened patiently. As I recounted the years of slow erosion, Caleb presented his evidence, and we laid bare the chilling truth of the commitment. She understood immediately. She saw the pattern, the deliberate intent, and she saw the fabricated documents for what they were, the key to unlocking the entire rotten structure. Sitting in her office, surrounded by the stacks of paper, the notes, the photos, the financial statements, the damning fabricated commitment papers, it felt real for the first time. This wasn't just my private nightmare anymore. It was a case, evidence, proof. The lawyer looked at us, her expression determined. "Vivian," she said, "Caleb, this is substantial. What Sterling did, especially with the commitment papers, that's a serious crime. We have more than enough to move forward. Are you ready?" Ready. Was I ready to face the man who had systematically tried to erase me in public? Ready to lay bare 30 years of humiliation, fear, and pain? Ready to risk everything again? I looked at Caleb, whose face was set with unwavering resolve. I looked at the pile of evidence, the physical embodiment of my stolen life. And I looked within myself, finding the steel forged in that sterile room, the quiet rage that had become my fuel. "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "We're ready." The decision was made. We would proceed legally. Sterling's carefully constructed world of charming lies and hidden cruelty was about to be exposed. The tension that had simmered beneath the surface for so long was about to boil over into open conflict. The fight for my life, my sanity, my freedom was about to move from the shadows into the harsh light of day. The legal battle began not with a bang, but a deafening silence from Sterling, followed swiftly by an explosion of rage and disbelief. Our lawyer filed the necessary papers, presenting the evidence of financial manipulation, the fabricated commitment documents, the pattern of psychological abuse, framing it all as a calculated scheme culminating in attempted unlawful detention and financial theft. Sterling was blindsided. He'd been so certain of my brokenness, so confident that I would never dare or be capable of fighting back. His initial reaction was textbook: denial, outrage, attempts to paint me as unstable, vindictive, manipulated by my son. He used his charm, his reputation, contacting mutual acquaintances, spreading malicious gossip. He tried to smear my name just as he had smeared my sanity for years. But this time, his words met resistance. This time, we had proof. The core of our case rested on the fabricated documents and Sterling's clear motive, demonstrated by the financial maneuvers. Psychological abuse is difficult to prove in court, often becoming a he said, she said battleground. But criminal acts like fabricating documents to secure a wrongful commitment and attempting to defraud someone of their assets leave a paper trail. And Caleb, guided by my memory, had found that trail. The confrontation climaxed in court. I remember the sterile, imposing room, the judge, the lawyers, the hushed anticipation. Sterling sat across the room, his face a mask of injured innocence, occasionally whispering furiously to his own legal team. Our lawyer called me to the stand. Taking that walk felt like traversing a lifetime. Every step was heavy, with the weight of years of silence, of being unseen, unheard. But as I sat there looking not at Sterling, but at the judge, at the people who held the power to finally see the truth, a profound calm settled over me. This wasn't about convincing Sterling. It was about speaking the truth, my truth, for the first time in decades in a place where it finally mattered. I told my story. I started with the small things, the subtle control, the erosion of my self-worth. I spoke of the isolation, the financial dependence. My voice was quiet at first, then grew stronger as I recounted Sterling's escalation, the terrifying pressure of the financial talks. I detailed the day he orchestrated my commitment, the lies he told, the feeling of being dismissed, invisible, trapped. And then I spoke about the fabricated documents, the undeniable proof of his intent. It was agonizing. Each word was a reliving of pain. But with each word, I felt lighter, stronger. The shame wasn't mine anymore. It belonged to him. Caleb testified too. He was articulate, calm, presenting his log, the photos, the financial records he'd painstakingly gathered. He spoke of his observations, his growing fear for his mother, the deliberate way Sterling manipulated situations. His testimony was objective, factual, devastating. Witnesses were called. Martha testified, speaking cautiously about how Sterling had gradually pushed her out of my life. A financial expert explained the complex, predatory nature of the trust documents Sterling had drafted. And then Sterling took the stand. He was still trying to play the part of the wronged husband, the concerned man whose wife was unstable, but under cross-examination, his facade began to crack. Our lawyer, armed with the irrefutable evidence, dissected his story, pointing out contradictions, exposing his lies. When confronted with the fabricated commitment documents, the color drained from his face. He stammered, his charm vanished, replaced by a desperate, cornered fury. He lashed out, calling me a liar, calling Caleb a spoiled, ungrateful son. But his rage only served to reveal the ugly truth beneath the polished surface. The carefully constructed image of the respected pillar of the community shattered, revealing the cruel, controlling man underneath. The evidence was overwhelming. The fabricated documents were the nail in the coffin. They weren't just proof of abuse. They were proof of criminal intent, a deliberate attempt to use the system to dispose of me. The immediate outcome was swift and decisive. Based on the evidence, particularly the fabricated documents and the clear financial motive, Sterling faced criminal charges related to unlawful detention and fraud. His reputation, the one thing he valued above all else, was utterly ruined. His power, built on lies and manipulation, crumbled. The immediate danger he posed to my physical safety and financial security was removed. It wasn't an instant fix. The emotional scars run deep and legal processes take time. But in that courtroom, the truth was seen, Sterling was exposed, and he was held accountable. Justice wasn't a grand, abstract concept. It was the quiet, powerful moment when my voice was finally heard, believed, and acted upon. The Avenger had finished her work. It's been some time since then. The court cases are over. Sterling is facing the consequences of his actions. The house, the beautiful, terrible cage, is now mine. Truly mine. There are no longer any locked doors on cupboards I can't access, no financial statements hidden away, no presence that makes me shrink and quiet my voice. Today, I'm sitting in the sunroom, the one Sterling always said was too bright or attracted too much dust. Yeah, it's bathed in light, and I'm surrounded by plants, their leaves vibrant and green. I have potting soil on my hands, something I haven't done freely in years. The air smells like earth and possibility. Martha visits often now. We laugh, we talk for hours about everything and nothing. The awkwardness of the lost years is slowly melting away. She understands. She saw. Caleb comes by too, whenever he can. The fear is gone from his eyes, replaced by pride and love. We don't dwell on the past constantly, but we acknowledge it. We talk about the journey, the darkness, and the fight. He tells me about his classes, about what he's learning about power dynamics and human behavior. He says my story should be a case study, a lesson in resilience. And maybe it is. Maybe the humanities lesson isn't just in understanding the mechanisms of control, the patterns of abuse. Maybe it's also in understanding the incredible, unyielding strength of the human spirit. How even when buried under years of oppression, a spark can remain waiting for the right moment, the right catalyst to ignite into a fierce, protective flame. I look out the window at the garden, planning what to plant next. I make decisions, big and small, every single day, simply because I can. What to eat for dinner, who to call, where to go, how to spend my money. These mundane choices feel miraculous. They are not just acts, they are declarations of independence. The journey was long, terrifying, and left scars I will carry forever. But I survived, I fought, and I won. Not just the legal battles, but the battle for my own soul, my own reality, my own life. I am no longer defined by the man who tried to erase me or by the fight to escape him. I am defined by the quiet strength I found within, by the unwavering love of my son, and by the simple, profound freedom of tending my own garden in my own house, bathed in sunlight that no one can take away. This is not just survival. This is living. This is peace. This is being Vivian again, and it is beautiful. How do you find today's story? Leave a comment below. If you like this video, please like and share. Especially, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss our interesting and exciting stories.